Music, I can't do this forever. I've been doing it since I was 21. As you move into your 80s, you say, hey, that's enough. Recently, on September 16, 2025, legendary actor Robert Redford passed away, leaving a deep sorrow in the hearts of the public. Known for his calm demeanor and for rarely being involved in controversy after his death, his family discovered torn-out diary pages in which Redford had listed 5 people he never wanted to be present at his funeral. They were those who had used every trick to bring him down, the ones who pushed him into scandals just to snatch away major roles. Among them was a gay star he once loved who eventually became his enemy in an unforgettable moment. So who were the stars Redford hated so much that he wished they would never show up in the final moment of his life? 1. Paul Newman, from secret lover to betrayer who haunted Redford for a lifetime. When people recall Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, 1969, they only remember the legendary on-screen duo, one of Hollywood's most classic films. Yet, behind the dazzling lights, Robert Redford and Paul Newman shared a secret. Both tried to bury a forbidden homosexual affair taboo in American society at the time. It was a love that was passionate yet shameful and ultimately left Redford with a wound that never healed. It all began in the summer of 1968 in Los Angeles. Newman, already over 40 and the king of Hollywood with countless iconic roles, met Redford, then in his early 30s and still building his career. Between auditions, Newman's rugged, arrogant charm drew Redford in. Crew members later recalled how Newman often found excuses to invite Redford back to a rented apartment on the outskirts of Salt Lake City. At first, FD resisted, terrified of society's judgment. But loneliness, admiration, and a craving for Newman's approval led him to give in. This was a time when homosexuality was branded as perverse, even a disease. Exposure could have destroyed both their careers, crushed by the press. Yet, they plunged into the affair. Rumors spread that during the filming of Butch Cassidy, the crew would sometimes wait for hours because Newman and Redford had vanished without explanation. A driver later told Vanity Fair that he once took them to a secluded cabin by a Utah lake where the two spent nights together. Their secret relationship continued into the early 1970s. In 1973, while filming The Sting in Chicago, a Chicago Tribune photographer captured Newman and Redford leaving the same room at the Drake Hotel in the early morning. Had that photo been published, it would have been a bombshell in Hollywood. But Paramount allegedly paid $250,000, a fortune at the time, to buy and destroy all copies. A PR staffer later admitted, "We would pay anything to protect Paul's gentleman image." As for Redford, who cared? For Newman, it was just a fling. For Redford, it was true love. He wrote shaky letters calling Newman his only soulmate. But Newman lived as the perfect husband beside Joanne Woodward, while rumors swirled of his past dalliances with James Dean and Tab Hunter. Redford was just another secret affair. For him, however, it was everything. His one forbidden love. He sacrificed everything, for the tragedy deepened when Redford married historian Lola Van Wagen in 1969. She eventually found letters Redford had written to Newman, hidden among his books. She stayed silent, but that silence only widened the distance between them. Friends confirmed, Redford never let go of Newman, and his marriage crumbled after 27 years in 1985. In a rare interview with People magazine, Lola said coldly, "I never really had him, even in his career." Redford could not escape Newman's shadow. In 1976, Paramount's poster for The Sting featured Newman front and center, while Redford was pushed to the margins. Los Angeles Times wrote, "Paul Newman is Hollywood's heart, Redford merely the shadow beside him." For Redford, it was an insult. Another knife Newman deliberately twisted. In 1980, Redford was set for a leading role in a Warner Brothers blockbuster, but it went to Newman instead. A former production head later recalled to The Guardian, Newman flat out said, "If Redford is in, he's out." Redford lost the chance of a lifetime. While Newman basked in the spotlight, Redford's private grief was compounded by family tragedy. In 1959, his eldest son, Scott, died of leukemia. Heartbroken, Redford told friends in drunken nights, "I lost my son, my wife, my career. Everything started the day Paul came into my life." For him, Newman wasn't just a betrayer, but the symbol of every wrong that haunted him. In his later years, the wound never healed. His family said he often dreamed of Newman waking in terror, muttering, "I still see Paul," smiling like it was 1969. His children worried, but could do nothing. The memory had become a ghost that haunted him until the end. In a note found in a wooden drawer at his Utah ranch, Redford had scrolled, "Paul once held my hand in the dark. But when the light came on, he left me alone." It was his final confession, and his harshest accusation. For Redford, Paul Newman was not just a forbidden love, but a betrayal, a humiliation, and a wound never forgiven. That is why Newman was the first name Redford banned from his funeral. 2. Jane Fonda, the goddess whose politics made Redford loathe her. Throughout Robert Redford's half-century career, few names, exasperated him as much as Jane Fonda. In 1967, when they starred in Barefoot in the Park, they were hailed as Hollywood's new golden couple. On-screen, they dazzled. Off-screen, however, they were polar opposites, Redford reserved and cautious, Fonda outspoken and eager to turn every stage into a political platform. The conflict exploded in 1972 when Jane was photographed in Hanoi sitting on an anti-aircraft gun. The image landed on the New York Times front page. The left praised her as an anti-war icon, but American veterans saw her as a traitor. Redford had nothing to do with it yet. Days later, Variety ran a headline: Robert Redford, Jane Fonda's co-star. Does he share her views? The baseless question dragged him into a storm. In his diary, he wrote of it as a storm I never chose. This was just the start. In 197, promoting The Electric Horseman, Redford wanted the film remembered as a statement on nature and the environment. But at a Las Vegas press conference, Jane hijacked the stage, attacking Reagan's administration, publicly calling Redford her silent companion. CBS broadcast the event live. The next day, Redford's office was flooded with calls from sponsors and reporters demanding he clarify his politics, something he had never wanted. Jane didn't stop. In 1981, at the Hollywood Bowl tribute, Redford was about to give a short speech about his love for cinema when Jane suddenly grabbed the microphone and turned the event into another anti-government tirade. ABC aired the scene nationwide, showing Redford frozen, humiliated in the background. The worst was her slander. In 1984, in Rolling Stone, Jane insinuated that Redford only cared about keeping a clean image for the public. A year later, in a New York panel, she hinted he was too scared to voice opinions, afraid of losing studio contracts. The comments painted him as a coward who valued image over integrity. For a man who prided himself on honesty, this was the harshest blow. Jane's scandals also dragged him down indirectly. When she was criticized for her outbursts at the Golden Globes in the 1980s, the press immediately linked Redford as her on-screen partner, pulling him into controversies. When her marriage to Ted Turner fell apart in 2001, People magazine wrote, "Every man tied to Jane ends up hurt," listing Redford among them despite decades of no connection. In crumpled diary pages found at his Utah ranch, Redford wrote that Jane didn't just destroy herself, but also tainted everyone who stood near her. He wrote, "Jane is the thorn in my career, a thorn that could never be pulled out. I truly hate her." And so Jane Fonda became the second name Redford absolutely forbade at his funeral. Even more shocking, the next name on the list was one thought to be his artistic soulmate director, Sidney Pollack, the man with whom Redford made many classics. 3. Sidney Pollack, the authoritarian director who turned into a bitter enemy. In Robert Redford's career, few people hurt him as deeply as Sidney Pollack. Their partnership in the 1970s produced classics like Jeremiah Johnson, 1972, The Way We Were, 1973, and especially Out of Africa, 1980, which won Oscars for both. But behind the acclaim was a relationship poisoned by conflict, betrayal, and resentment. Their first clash came during 3 Days of the Condor, 1975. Redford, now a Hollywood A-listaster, grew frustrated with Pollack's increasingly domineering style. Scenes were reshot dozens of times, not for artistic reasons, but for Pollack's ego. Crew members recalled Redford once throwing his script to the floor and storming out. Pollack chased after him, shouting in front of everyone, escalating the tension. The breaking point was Out of Africa, 1985. Redford wanted his character written with more depth, but Pollack insisted all the focus stay on Mariel Street. Their fights grew so violent that one lighting technician told Variety he witnessed them nearly brawling in Kenya, grabbing each other's collars, smashing chairs before security intervened. Then came money disputes. Redford was promised $7 million for Out of Africa, but received only $5.2 million. The missing $1.88 million, he believed, had been pocketed by Pollack. He tried to investigate, but the accounting had been meticulously covered up. Hollywood insiders whispered that Pollack had taken the difference. Redford felt cheated and betrayed. In his diary, he wrote, "I acted my whole life to feed a greedy director." The most bitter fallout came in 1988, when Redford sued Pollack for cutting key scenes that diminished